In this video, I'll be covering the assembly of my new benchtop router table. And there's a lot to cover here, so let's get right into it. The first thing that I did was I cut out all of the parts. And now I'm ready to put it all together. I'm starting with the side panels, and I'm gluing on the cleats that will fasten the front and back. Next, I'm going to fasten the base mounting cleats in exactly the same way. I'm going to put some glue on there, and then I'm going to drive in some 18 gauge brads. And of course, if you don't have a brad nailer, you can always use screws here or just clamps. It's actually the glue that holds these parts on there. And when I have both of those done, I'm going to add the mounting cleat backer. And once again, that just gets glued in place and held in with a few pins. And before I set these aside to let the glue dry, I'm going to fasten the top support on one panel and the top mounting cleat on the other panel. At this point, it really doesn't matter which one because they'll work on either side. They're both basically the same. And if you're one of those people that just doesn't trust glue to hold parts together, you can always put screws in here as well. I let the glue dry on the side panels, and now I'm screwing on the back panel. I'm just drilling pilot holes and driving in number 8 screws. I'm not using any glue on this, just in case I need to take it apart again. The next step is to put the router lift inside, and to do that I've taken the front hand wheel off and the locking knob, and they'll fit through holes that I've drilled in the front panel. And once again, I'm not using any glue on this, just in case I need to take it apart again. I mentioned in the plans that there are a couple of different ways to fasten the lift inside the cabinet, and what I'm going to be doing is screwing it right onto the front and back, very much like I fasten the panels themselves. And that way everything is rigidly locked in place and ready for me to move on. The other way is to attach it to the underside of the top after I put the top in. But since the top doesn't go on until after the lift goes in, that's a little bit less convenient. With the lift installed in the cabinet, I can put the controls back on the front. I'm going to start with the locking knob. And what I've done here is I've changed the knob to something smaller, or a lower profile actually. And now I'm going to take the rod back out and shorten it and put it back in. This knob is there to lock the lift in place after you've made your adjustments on it, and it really doesn't have to be very tight to do that. And then I can put the hand wheel on and test it out. With the cabinet fully assembled, I need to get the router that I want to put in there, and it's the one that's currently in my table saw wing that I put in there a few years ago. I made a video about that, and the link to that is in the description. And this is basically just my router lift with a cover on one side for dust collection. As for the wiring for this, I'm just going to transfer what I've got done here to the new cabinet. Basically, it's just a box with a switch, and the power comes in through an extension cord that I cut. And then the other end of the extension cord that's wired into the box will power the vacuum that will work as the dust collection for this router table. I'm not really going to go into a lot of the wiring details here because basically it's the same as what I did before when I mounted this in my table saw. So if you want to check out the details on that, like I said, the link to that video is in the description. Long ago, I cut the cord off this router to put in one of my earlier router tables. So I got to work with that here. But otherwise, if I had a machine that would just plug in that had a full cord on there, I would use an extension cord that has multiple plugs on the end. And that way I can cut that and feed that into the box. And then the switch will turn that on and off. And I'll be able to plug the router and the vacuum into that. I don't know if I mentioned this in the other video that I talked about earlier, but even though I'm working with a tool that's double insulated, that means it has no ground wire, I still have to use a grounded extension cord to make these connections, and the ground wire that's in that cord has to connect to the box that I'm putting in. Any metal components that you can actually touch with your fingers have to be grounded when they contain wires like this. And that's something you should keep in mind for your own personal safety. Now that I've got the router installed and the wiring all buttoned up, I can put the top on. The top is a fairly complex part, so what I did was I made a separate video showing exactly how I did that, and the link to that video is in the description as well. There are measurements on the drawing that show where the top goes on the cabinet, but it's better to actually have the router in place and use that to center your top. And then I'm going to check the sides to make sure that it's parallel to the cabinet before I drill countersinks and drive screws in through the top to hold this down. Of course, I'm doing this through the top because it is the most practical way to do it. But if you're not crazy about seeing the screws up there, you can always do it from underneath. With the router installed and the top put on, I can start working on the fence. And just like the cabinet, I've already got all the parts cut out and ready to go. So all I need to do is assemble them. And here I'm fastening the fence backer to the fence deck parts with glue, and then I'm firing in some 1 1/4 inch brads to clamp them together while the glue dries. And before the glue does fully dry on this, I'm going to add the fence braces. And what they do is they permanently brace the fence, and they also keep it 90 degrees to the table. Next, I can attach the parts to the dust port, and they just get glued on exactly the same way. And once again, I'm using brads to hold these in place while the glue dries. At this point, there's not a whole lot left to do. Here I'm putting the movable fence fronts on by installing the 1/4 inch carriage bolts in the recesses. I'm just using a little dab of construction adhesive on there to keep these locked in place. And then I've got a 1/4 inch fender washer and a wing nut on the back at each bolt location, and that allows me to tighten or loosen them so that they can be adjusted. Now that the fence is fully assembled, I can put it on the router table, even if it's just temporary, because what I really need to do next with this is give all the exterior parts at least 2 coats of water-based polyurethane to keep it looking good. But I just can't resist giving it a try in the meantime. If you enjoy this project and would like to build one of these yourself, the plans are available on my website, and there's a link in the description that'll take you right there. This is a compact benchtop router table, and I designed it that way for maximum versatility. If you don't have the space, you can set it up on your workbench and then quickly put it away when you're done. Or you can do like I'm going to do with this one and build a stand for it to go on that will have dust collection built in. And that's an upcoming project, so stay tuned for that.